How's it going, bros and scoungs? Welcome to Geekritique. My name is Dakota. I recently made a massive Avatar World of Pandora timeline, and one thing I feel that I barely touched on was how much actually happens in that 15-year time jump between films. So today we're diving deep into those 15 years between the first Avatar film and Avatar: The Way of Water, detailing all the events that we know must have happened between the two films in the rough order we assume that they must have taken place. This video will contain full spoilers for the Avatar: The Next Shadow comic series and Avatar: The High Ground graphic novel trilogy. So, if you want to read those first, find links to grab your copies in the description below. This video will also spoil certain scenes from The Way of Water, so beware of spoilers. If you enjoyed this type of content, be sure to give this video a like so that YouTube will send more videos just like it your way. Also, at the end of this video, we'll be updating our Avatar timeline with some newly discovered timeline information, so stick around for that. To truly capture all that happens between these two films, we have to lay out some events that occurred even before the first Avatar movie, starting with the birth of the Recon Marines, which include the avatars of Miles Quaritch and Lyle Wainfleet on Earth. These avatars were petri dished into existence some 5 years before the first Avatar film, but won't arrive on Pandora until they're about 20 years of age. In 2153 or early 2154, Miles Socorro, better known as Spider, is born to Colonel Miles Quaritch and Paz Socorro. Both parents died during the Battle of the Hallelujah Mountains in their fight against the Na'vi. Shortly thereafter, the RDA are kicked off of Pandora and are sent packing back to Earth on their large ISV vessels. At any given time, there are 7 of these ISVs going to and from Pandora, and considering no other ships arrive on Pandora between 2154 and 2168, we can make the assumption that the RDA were able to send a message turning their ships around so they can all regroup back on Earth. This led to an accelerated counteroffensive which kicked the recon program, classified as Project Phoenix, into high gear. Some humans are allowed to stay on Pandora, like Drs. Norm Spellman and Max Patel. Nash and Mary McCosker are personnel allowed to remain on Pandora, and they adopt Spider as he was too young to bring back to Earth, though Spider never accepts them as his true parents. After the war with the humans, the need for Jake Sully to remain in his role as Toruk Makto is no longer necessary, and he lets his Toruk return to the wild as he takes on his new title of Olo'Ektan, or leader of the Omaticaya. The home tree that was brought down continues to burn for over 2 weeks, and Jake relocates the Omaticaya to just outside of Hell's Gate, the human settlement, for a new temporary home. The human settlement, now being run on a skeleton crew, is holding up extremely poorly, and relations with the Na'vi are at an all-time low. Their giant 3D printer, which they call the Grinder, needs material to continue working, but the Na'vi are barring the humans from continuing to mine. Jake Sully becomes the mediator between the two groups and works out a deal that's beneficial for both parties. Tsute would have been the Olo'Ektan after the death of Etukan, but having also died in battle, he named Jake Sully the next leader. Everyone in the clan accepts him except for Tsute's power-hungry parents, Ateo and Artsut, who believe the title was stolen from their family lineage. They push their second son Arvok to challenge Jake to the right of First Blood over the position of Olo'Ektan. Jake wins easily, but due to a cheap trick, Arvok poisons Jake, sending him into a hallucinogenic coma. In that coma, Jake is allowed to confront his insecurities and receives guidance on how he should best lead the people. The remaining Hell's Gate humans and the Na'vi work together to bring Jake Sully back from near death, and despite him having every right to kill Tsute's family for treason, he exiles them to the Mengquan clan in the Ashes. I wonder if we'll see them in Avatar 3. A deleted scene in the original Avatar suggests that Neytiri and Jake conceived their first child during that film, and by 2155 they give birth to their firstborn, Neteyam. Sometime during Neytiri's pregnancy with Neteyam, it's discovered that the avatar of Grace Augustine is also pregnant. Who the father is and how she got pregnant remains a mystery. Kitty is born shortly after Neteyam and is adopted by Jake and Neytiri. They were born so close to each other that they share their first communion with Eywa together at the Tree of Souls. Neteyam is 15 and Kitty is 14 by the time of the Way of Water. Neytiri and Jake's second child, Loak, is born around 2156, being 14 by the time of the Way of Water. The early years after the RDA is kicked off of Pandora were mostly peaceful, and one of the defining memories for Jake Sully was being able to teach Neteyam how to hunt for food with a bow and arrow. At a young age, Kitty becomes the first child to bond with an Ikran, though not through Iknimaya. Somehow, she just walked up to a banshee and asked it to bond with her, and it worked, this being the first time that is ever known to have happened. At some point, we know that either Jake Sully goes to the Metkaina clan in the atolls northeast of the Omaticaya rainforest, or Tonawari and Runal visit the Omaticaya, as they appear to be well acquainted with each other by the time of the Way of Water. Most likely Jake Sully went to them. This meeting definitely occurred sometime after the first movie, as the Metkaina village was too far away to realistically join Toruk Makto's fight against the RDA at the Battle of the Hallelujah Mountains. This familiarity allowed Jake Sully to invoke Uturu to later protect his family. 7 years after they're kicked off of Pandora, the last of the RDA forces have finally landed back on Earth around 2161, though the RDA have long been preparing for their return to Pandora, building out a number of new ISV ships in the meantime. The copied consciousness and memories of the fallen Marines from the first film begin their integration into their respective avatar bodies. By this point, Amrita, the miracle liquid found inside the brain of Tolkuns, has likely been discovered to have miraculous anti-aging properties when administered to humans, and becomes the RDA's primary source of funding on their return to Pandora, though the mining of unobtainium is still very lucrative and necessary. RDA marine biologist Dr. Ian Garvin is credited with the discovery of Amrita in Dead Tolkun, and he likely discovered the substance on the return trip to Earth, if he was allowed to continue his studies outside of Cryo. Either that, or he discovered it by the time they got back to the planet. Either way, the RDA quickly turn around and head back to Pandora, this time with a fleet of 10 ISV ships led by General Francis Ardmore. Earth, by this time, is dying, and humanity's only hope is to gain a strong foothold on Pandora, making this their top priority. Jake Sully, realizing the humans would waste no time at all in returning, begins training a war party of Na'vi and humans alike to fight them off in 2161. This gives them 7 years to prepare, and he teaches them to use human firearms, something that goes contrary to the laws of Ewa, but he rationalizes that it's the only way to defeat the humans. They train in 0G, in orbit around Pandora, preparing to attack the ISV before the RDA have time to land, taking advantage of the literal high ground. A little over a year after the initial ISV ships leave Earth, a second wave is sent which shuttles the recombinants, or the avatars of Colonel Miles Quaritch and the other Marines, to Pandora. Tuktire is born in 2163 and is 7 years of age by the time of the main events of the Way of Water. She is best known as simply Tuk. At some point during these 14 years, Norm adopts a Na'vi orphan as his own. Not much is known about the child. Neteyam is the second of Sully's kids to bond with an Ikran, but the first through Iknimaya. Loek fails his first attempt at Iknimaya, but after a season or two, he is allowed to try again and succeeds in bonding with an Ikran, or Banshee. At some point in her teen years, it's assumed that Kitty begins showing growing signs of a special power gifted to her through Ewa. 14 years after the Omatikaya's home tree burns down, Moak creates a connection to a new home tree that they call Elder Brother, but Jake is wary of allowing them to find a new permanent home, as he knows the humans will be there very soon and it will become a primary target. Sure enough, the Sky People returned 14 years after they were kicked out of Pandora. They've never come with more than one ISV ship at a time before, but this time they come with 10. They mean business. While in orbit, General Ardmore's first mission for her men is to find and kill Jake Sully. In the week or so that they have between the deceleration of their hyperdrive engines and their landing on Pandora, Jake and his war party have time to practice in 0G one last time before the RDA arrive. Neteyam joins them as they've recently created an anti-grav suit for him. Before they make landfall, Ardmore offers the humans of Hell's Gate the choice to turn around and rejoin the RDA or be killed like they plan to do with Sully. Over half of the humans, including Spider's adoptive family, the McCoskers, are willing to take the deal with the RDA, despite Jake's insistence on fighting them off of their home. The Omaticaya, having only just found their new home tree, are required to get up and move to high camp in the Hallelujah Mountains as a place of shelter. Spider is left behind with the defecting humans at Hell's Gate, including his adoptive family. Jake's war party begins their strategic attack on Ardmore, flying up to their ship to negotiate a deal where the RDA will get the opportunity to return home with trillions of dollars worth of unobtainium if they simply turn around and leave. Jake knows they won't bite, so the longer the negotiations go for, Jake blows up random spots of high value in Hell's Gate, while his war party plans a strike outside their ships. Kitty and Loak break free from their trek to their new home in the Hallelujah Mountains to break Spider free, but some of the humans, namely the McCoskers, have ulterior motives and lock the kids up. Unbeknownst to Jake, Nash McCosker makes the deal with Ardmore and tells her all about Sully's ambush, foiling his plan and even brags about having his kids imprisoned. Sully's plan now failed, they find a way to get away from Ardmore and her men and head back to Pandora. General Ardmore follows in hot pursuit. Spider breaks Kitty and Loak out of their incarceration and they make a break for it. The SecOps team chases them as well as the other Solis who've just made it back down from orbit, even sending out tracker bots, which are these intense looking robotic hounds. The family is eventually picked up and saved from the forest floor, but Ardmore chases their shuttle down to the ocean. The only way they can get free is if they crash the ship and essentially fake their own deaths. Norm eventually finds them and takes them to safety. The RDA land their giant module ships and simultaneously level the surrounding area and the general circumference they plan to use for Bridgehead City, as well as the surrounding kill zone area. Much of the forest is destroyed in this effort to overtake the land, as we see early on in The Way of Water. The RDA begin feverishly building up Bridgehead City via a mix of heavy lifting and 3D printing using newer and more powerful grinders. They use these printers to make the ships necessary to hunt down Tulkun for their Amrita. Payakan, a young Tulkun bull, hears of the organized attacks on the Tulkun, and he coordinates a war party of presumably Tawanui clan Na'vi and a pod of Tulkun to strike back at the humans. The whalers they strike at aren't the same crew as Mick Scoresby's, as he claims he's never seen them lift a fin, but regardless, Payakan's attack fails miserably, leading to the deaths of many Tulkun and Na'vi alike. Because of this, Payakan is labeled an outcast. Jake Sully and his war party wage a war of attrition for over a year before Quaritch's recon group finally arrives on Pandora in their ISV shuttle. And that is every important event we know that happens between the first two Avatar films. I'm sure, as time goes on, more information will be made available about this time period, but I hope you found this informative and enjoyable. If you did, don't forget to give this video a huge thumbs up and subscribe for more. Did we miss any other big, important events? Let me know down below. Before we go, there's a few updates to our timeline that we want to iron out as we have some new information. First and foremost, our placement for the Cirque du Soleil play, Toruk the First Flight, needs a bit of an adjustment. We have it set in 837 BC when it should be 847 BC, 10 years earlier. The only information we have on the play is that it occurs 3,000 years before the first movie, and our initial math was incorrect. 847 BC fits much better. Secondly, and this is fairly interesting, we need to adjust some of the dates featured on the timeline prior to the first film because of a factor I've never really had to consider before when creating other timelines: time dilation and relativity. While it's well documented in the first film that it takes the ISV almost 6 years of space travel to get from Earth to Pandora, that doesn't account for the time elapsed on either Earth or Pandora, which is actually 7 years. The closer one gets to traveling at the speed of light, the more time slows down. Because the ISV travels at 70% of the speed of light, 7 years for those on Pandora or Earth is only just short of 6 years for those in transit. This is confirmed in the High Ground Volume 1, so we need to move a few dates back on our timeline. Lastly, it's just been confirmed by Joshua Izzo, the Vice President of Franchise Development for Avatar, that the upcoming games Avatar: Frontiers of Pandora and Avatar: Reckoning, as well as the Pandora-themed land in Disney's Animal Kingdom, are all canon. But we'll explore all that and more in future videos. I want to thank our Patreon members for making timeline content like this possible. Every month, there are more and more of you. Thank you so much. You guys can find an updated Avatar timeline graphic over on Patreon right now. And now we shift our focus over to the MCU for our next few videos. We hope you all subscribe for more. If you need more Avatar content, don't miss our big Avatar timeline and our recent video about 5 things you'll notice only on a rewatch of Avatar: The Way of Water. Thanks guys, have a good one.